let's make a start. Hello, everyone. Thank you to Magnolia for inviting me here today. My name's Mark Newton. I'm the JBoss Community Lead. And the talk I'm going to give today is about extending Magnolia CMS with ModeShape. ModeShape's a project that we host at JBoss.org. If you aren't already familiar with it, I'll introduce it and tell you a bit about it and how it can help to give you more functionality. So first of all, being on the business track, I'm going to keep it at quite a high level and introduce people first to what is the JBoss community, who we are, what we do, and what we're not and what we don't do. Then I'll go into how we use Magnolia currently for our website, JBoss.org. And by doing that, I'll show you where we've reached some limitations with the current version of Magnolia we're running, and particularly with the JackRabbit component. That will lead me on to explain how ModeShape can help us to overcome these problems and be actually used as a substitution for JackRabbit. And this will then open up some new possibilities which weren't possible before. And we'll finish off with some Q&A. So, firstly, what is the JBoss community? Well, the best definition is a group of users and developers that work together and collaborate on some Java middleware projects that are led by Red Hat. Can I have a show of hands who doesn't know JBoss community or JBoss.org, please? So no one. Okay, so everyone knows what it is. Good. What some of you might not know, because it seems to have been a bit difficult getting this message across, is that we use the projects at JBoss.org to integrate together to form platforms. So the projects themselves are open source projects, but you can't get support for these projects on their own. Instead, what we do is we pull them together into platforms like the Enterprise Application Platform, SOA Platform, and so on. And these are the Red Hat products that you can buy subscriptions for and support training and consultancy. So, there are two types of project we typically have. The first is either in a platform itself or going to be in a platform. And the second kind are projects that help with development of the platforms. So, for example, bytecode analysis, or injecting bytecode into classes at runtime for testing purposes. So really the key point to understand is that the projects are supported but by the community within the JBoss community, and the platforms are supported by Red Hat with subscriptions. Is there anyone here that didn't realize that? Okay. If you go to JBoss.org, you'll see at the top we've got some tabs and it says projects and products. So we tried to make it clear. It's a little unusual because there are not many people that do this. Red Hat's kind of a key player in this. And this is where the branding comes in incidentally. The JBoss by Red Hat brand is the product brand for the platforms. The JBoss community brand is for the projects. So within the JBoss community, there are a number of websites that we use. The main one is JBoss.org, and that has projects such as the ones you can see here. JBoss DNA is actually the old name for ModeShape, the thing I'm going to be talking about today. But in addition to JBoss.org, we also have a few sites, MobiSense, Scene Framework, and JGroups, that will be coming to JBoss.org, and it's just they're still outside of it right now. So the intention is to move them inside. And the reason for this situation is because, typically, sometimes we acquire technology by acquisition at Red Hat. So MobiSense is one of those. JGroups is a similar case. Other times, some projects feel it makes sense to develop their own website for forums and wiki to demonstrate the technology. So the Scene project did that with Scene Framework. Of course, over time, it becomes more and more difficult to manage as a standalone site, so that's why we're going to fold it back into JBoss.org to get economies of scale. So How do we compare to other similar sites? Well, you can see here a selection of source forges, if you like, on the internet, the most well-known ones. I've put it into 3 categories because you can kind of divide them into these categories, and it helps you understand what's going on. So if we start at the bottom with SourceForge.net, it has nearly 250,000 projects as of the 10th of August this year. And this is just any project can start up there. It's just a system for anyone to try and innovate and do something with software. And it's funded by GeekNet. Going a level up, we've got Java.net and Kenai, which are now owned by Oracle. And the plan is to move the Java.net projects onto the Kenai infrastructure and then call it Java.net. So in total, they'll have about 16,300 projects. Again, that website or those websites are just for any old project that people want to start and play with, just to see what happens. Google, obviously, have got their oar in this, so they've got Google Code. So they're a sort of late entry into the game. You can't get, or couldn't find a way to get the absolute number of projects on the site, but if you search for the letter A, it gives you back about 6,000, so it's probably around there. And then at the top of that category, we've got Codehouse. So Codehouse is a kind of homegrown forge that has 305 projects on it at the moment. And that's backed by Contigix, who provide hosting for free. And also some revenue comes in from Google Ads. So I've grouped those together as help ecosystem, because they're really there to serve any project or host any project. Above that, we have foundations, so Apache and Eclipse. So the point of these websites is to further the agenda of the foundation. In Apache's case, it's to spread Apache licensed software, using the governance model that Apache have. And with Eclipse, it's to obviously build out the Eclipse platform for tooling. So multiple companies typically sponsor these sites. And then at the top, we have JBoss.org, which is funded by Red Hat, and SpringSource, which is funded by VMware now. And the point of these sites is to help the products of the respective companies. So you can see a breakdown of how the number of projects hosted goes down as you go up. So that's just a breakdown of one way to compare is in the market. If you look at our infrastructure and how we run the site, we obviously have development tools for the projects. So we have Jira from Atlassian, Fisheye as well. We use Subversion for repositories, and we'll soon be using Git. We have wiki forums and blogs like many other sites, but we've chosen to integrate them together with a product from Jive called SBS. Mailman, as usual, for the mailing lists. Magnolia comes in for the project pages. So each project on our site has an area, where they can create any arbitrary web page, and that's Magnolia that's powering that. Maven, of course, to hold all of our build artifacts, that we're using Nexus for that right now. And then we have a couple of in-house applications. One of them is for contributor license agreements that we need to assign intellectual property rights accordingly, because Red Hat lead the projects, so we need to transfer IP rights or co-assign IP rights as people make contributions. And we built that ourselves. It's called Crichton, after the character in Red Dwarf, because it's helpful. And blog aggregation is this idea that you have kind of planets for the different sites. So when people have personal blogs all around the internet, you want to aggregate those together on particular subjects. So we have our own blog aggregation software called Borg, because it's like the Borg. And then at the end we have a proxy layer, of course, which is just Apache. So that fronts the whole thing and allows us to use the JBoss.org domain with subdomains for each of the applications. So that brings us on to how we use Magnolia. As I explained, it's for the project pages, And what we did was we created a library of paragraph types and styles for the different project teams to use. So it's relatively straightforward for any of them to build a page that looks nice. One of the things we wanted to do was try and make the projects appear slightly more professional than the average project on the other forges. You know, typically you fire up a wiki and just put all your information in there, and it's great, but it doesn't always look great. And some of the resources we have in the JBoss community are visual designers or graphic designers who did these slides. So we take advantage of that. All of our projects look really nice. We don't see why they shouldn't. It also helps with documentation. We can do really nice images and logos and icons. And also we use those resources for the graphical elements of the project, so the web admin GUIs, etc. So we also use the document management system in Magnolia to hold things like images that the project teams wish to put on the web pages. And some of them also use the DMS to store XML schema definitions or document type definitions. So this all works well for us, but we did find some limitations, and a couple of them are shown here. And this really captures the essence of where we're hitting the limit with Magnolia that currently uses JackRabbit. You know, some of the content that we wish to use in the web page lives outside. So, for example, download binaries at downloads.jboss.org are served by the Apache web server and uploaded in the background using SCP or rsync. But we wish to put links to them into the web page, you know, like a download table. And the current way this works is that the user brings up a paragraph configuration dialog, shown on the left there, and has to fill in the absolute URL at the top, and then metadata about each file. So what we'd really like is for them to be able to use the JCR browser in Magnolia, you know, to navigate through the file system and just go that file, that file, that file, and it'll do the work for them. Alternatively, if you flip it round, we've also got content inside the Magnolia JackRabbit data store that we'd like to access outside. So a good example of that are the images that people put in there. So, you know, we'd like these to be served by Apache so we can increase performance. But we'd like people to manage them through the GUI of Magnolia. So in this case, we can't because it's stored internally inside the JackRabbit data store. So you can see there's a sort of mismatch for us anyway, that we have content that we want in certain places for certain reasons, but we're restricted to having that content either in JackRabbit so Magnolia can manage it, or outside so we can manage it using different ways, and the two can't really mix. So technically this is what's causing this problem. You know, the design of JackRabbit as a JCR implementation uses what's called a persistence manager, for which you have different implementations. So you can have one of these per workspace within the repository, but still the idea is that you're storing stuff in this repository. And if you want to access it, you come in through the JCR API. You know, you can sometimes get to data outside as well. Like if you use the XML persistence manager, because the files will be XML, you can read them, you know, externally without going through the JCR API. But that's kind of a corner case. The other persistence managers are optimized for performance, which means the data format's binary, so it's not easy to see, you know, what the content is unless you go through JCR. So that's just the way JackRabbit was built. So what is ModeShape and how can it help? Well, ModeShape is a JCR implementation, but it starts from the premise that your content will live elsewhere already. Okay, so it's not, you don't presuppose that you're going to fill it full of content to start with. Okay, so in our case, we've already got the binary files on downloads.jboss.org. So what it does is it can connect to different locations where your content is using connectors, and it can also federate JCR repositories together to give you a unified view of your content wherever it may live in any of your systems or information repositories. And it's really the federation part which sets ModeShape apart from other JCR implementations. You know, JackRabbit, you can see that you can assign different persistence managers to different workspaces, and it's a similar concept here with the connectors. It's just that each connector represents a repository, not a workspace. So it opens up more options. What we needed to do was work with the Magnolia community to basically swap out JackRabbit for ModeShape. And that work has largely been done now. It took a while because there were a few dependencies on JackRabbit we had to remove. But basically we're in a situation now where we can swap out the provider implementation class and install ModeShape as a direct replacement for JackRabbit, and everything works as normal, plus we get this extra functionality. The next thing to do, which we're working on now, is to rewrite this download table paragraph we have, so you can actually use the Magnolia JCR browser to go through the content. And then also for our second requirement is to reconfigure the document management system module so that when you place content through the Magnolia GUI, it actually stores it on the file system where Apache can see it and serve it up directly. Okay, I'll go and try and give you a demo now of ModeShape so you can see it working. So what we have here is one of the examples from the Getting Started guide of ModeShape. And what it's doing is it's got three repositories that it's federating together. So you've got aircraft, well, you've got cars first of all, which is using an in-memory connector. Then you've got aircraft, which is using a JPA connector, which goes to an in-memory hypersonic SQL database. And then you've got a third repository using a file system connector going to what's called UFOs. And it's federating all of those three together to create a vehicles repository, which is stored in a cache. So with this little text user interface, you can select one of the repos, let's say aircraft, and then you can use Unix-style command line commands to see where you are in the repo and list out the current node, and it will give you the properties and any child nodes here. So it's pretty simple. We can just cd into aircraft and list that and so on, or we can list back a directory. To exit it, you just type exit. So if we go into vehicles, number 4, let's have a look what we've got. Well, let's go into the vehicles node. So it just shows you the same information, which shows you that you're navigating around the same parts of the repository. The way it's able to federate all these things is because underneath the scenes, ModeShape's implemented using a graph approach. So it just simply goes down and down and down. It's a bit like Git.
I have one question related to the third point in progress. First, less federation, where you wrote, be able to store documents to the file system, and as part of ModeShape. And wouldn't that be also something which you could solve with a other persistence manager of JackRabbit, just writing to the file system? Or is the objective maybe really have it in proper structures with attributes so that you can browse this file system by other applications?
Well, the point of ModeShape isn't so much the fact you can persist the data to different backends, because, as you say, JackRabbit already does that. It's more the federation of repositories. And I asked this question to Randall, who's the lead for ModeShape, specifically because I knew it would get asked. And basically what he said was, whereas JackRabbit deals with persistence at the workspace level conceptually, ModeShape does it at the repository level. And in JCR terminology, there are a lot more things you can do at the repository level semantically to have more options available. So it's really the federation side of it which is what gives ModeShape, what differentiates ModeShape from other JCR implementations.
Okay, but still, so federation is rather having existing file system, maybe, anyway, that's a great initiative, by the way, connecting, let's say, repositories from, SharePoint, Documentum, OpenText, etc., to, present documents from the inside to the outside world, so that's a perfect initiative. On the other hand, again, she said be able, where I understood DMS, maybe I misunderstood that. Did you meant DMS module of Magnolia there?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's the other way around. So it's not federation, it's rather publication into another source. Like you said, file system, that you can access it by Apache. And means that you can say configure, that you not only write the documents, but also make the paths built by the attributes of the documents, etc.
Yeah, so this is coming on to the next example actually, so let's go through that. So what sequences do is when you place content into the JCR repository, the sequences will look at the content and break it into pieces so they can process what's inside of it as a file and put that information, like metadata, it's an image file because it will contain metadata. It'll pull that apart and put it into the JCR tree in another location. So you can it's called derived information in the latest terminology. But let's say, for example, you had an SVN administration file, which is what we have. In there you have lines which determine groups and directories for permissions, and the list of usernames is a comma-separated list. But that's all just in one file. So what we could do is, with a sequencer, when we load in the administration file to ModeShape, we can tell a sequencer to pull apart that list of names and put that into a structure within the JCR repository that we can then query. Okay, so you can pull data apart. So in this example, you have an in-memory repository, and you can upload different files to it. So there are a number of files in the working directory of the example. So you tell it the name of the file relative to the current working directory and then enter a location. So let's put this at Magnolia. And we'll call it caution, the same thing. So now if we search the in-memory repository, we'll see that something's been added into the path images caution JPEG. So this is the metadata coming from that caution JPEG file that's been pulled apart and placed into the in-memory repository. So you can do the same thing for an MP3 file. We'll put that into touring. Okay, it's working off the file suffix when I'm placing it in there, so I need to do it again. Sample 1. Let's put it in A, B, sample 1. Okay, so it's now sequenced that file as it loaded it in. So underneath a new node called MP3s, you can see the metadata from there, the ID3 information. So because of the way ModeShape's designed, the connectors know about the type of content that's going through them, and they work on a command design. And those same commands, once they're being processed, allow you to do things like sequencing or notification. So you can listen to nodes for when things change in the repository. Okay, so obviously with this integration and working together with the Magnolia community, we've managed to benefit both the projects. For ourselves, the ModeShape project started out as a JCR 2 implementation, so it didn't have the JCR SQL optional feature of version 1 that Magnolia needed, so we actually implemented that for them. And likewise, Magnolia resolved a few issues to do with, swapping out JackRabbit for another JCR implementation. So, once we do this swap, of course we'll be able to use the new features of ModeShape, like the sequencers, as I said before, to look at the SVN administration files for one thing. But we can also write connectors to, it's missing the line again, but connectors to connect to all of our external applications and pull in the content. And the point here is that, the big thing with ModeShape is because it federates these repositories and each repository connects to a different system, you can view all your existing information in your environment in the same way using the JCR API. That's the real plus point. So if you've got data schemas, let's say, in databases or in files or somewhere else, you can look at all those the same way because you can present it the same way. So if it's in a file, you can break it apart with a sequencer and put it into the same node structure as the one that you're pulling out of the database. So it allows you to look at all your information. Yeah, well, the sequencer works because the data or content's being imported into JCR, but it will break it apart and put it into a separate tree.
But is it then stored in ModeShape, or if you change, for instance, if you change the file, is it immediately changed?
Right. So yeah, changing a file is an important thing. So if you read JackRabbit, it says one of the reasons why they've put everything in one data store that they control through JCR is so they know when everything's changed, because you're doing it through JCR. So obviously, we have the same restrictions. So if you change content outside of ModeShape, it won't know, unless you develop something to tell it. So yeah, you can't get around the fact that these are constraints that any system will face. But you can do things like with the sequencer, with the connectors to Subversion, for example. They're stateless, the connectors, so it doesn't know when things have changed. But if you told it to do an SVN update, it would get the list of things that have changed and then be able to act on them and pull them in. So there are ways around it depending on how your data is treated. So it's not magically going to work for everything. You do have to understand how each bit of data is going to be updated and act accordingly. But it does allow you to put it all together into a federated JCR view. So, the big thing for us then will be paragraph development will then be condensed into understanding just the JCR API, because all the content will be there from Jira, from Fisheye, from Subversion, from SBS, from wherever. It'll just all look the same, so we can just place it onto the web pages. And then taking that idea and bringing it forward, we can connect to the engineering operations side of things and pull out monitoring data from Nagios and create monitoring pages for the website so people know when systems are up or down or so on. And of course, because we got this federated view, we can check that a user has a consistent set of permissions across the applications. Because right now you go into each one and edit the permissions separately, and to check them that they're all the same, you could write some software that did it, but it happens, by design with ModeShape. So it sort of solves that problem for us.
Will it be possible to use ModeShape to run a single query across separate JCR repositories by federating them into a single ModeShape repository?
Yeah.
So that's definitely possible, because
yeah, that's exactly the idea. Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, we are developing more connectors. So one of them will connect to, let's say, JackRabbit or a JCR repository. So, yeah, it just works. In a way, you could push ModeShape in between Magnolia and JackRabbit and not know it was there, and then just extend it, which is why it's called extending.
So you could, for example, use it to create a unified view of some repositories that you have anyway in your Magnolia, just to be able to run queries across multiple repositories, because I think that's not possible at the moment.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, the reason why ModeShape was developed for Red Hat, as I said, projects are done for products, is because in the SOA platform product, you want to inventory all of your software assets in the environment and know where they are for registration and so on. And this is a really good way of doing it, because you don't want to move the data from where it is and put it in yet another silo. You want to get away from this mentality of keeping on duplicating data.
I have two questions. Did you write it down anywhere? How you did replacement of the JackRabbit for ModeShape? Is it on a blog or something so that other people can do it as well?
Not yet, but basically it's that line of XML that says provider implementation class. You change that.
Okay. Because how long would it take if some other company would do this?
Yeah.
Is it an easy task now that you have found out how to do it?
Well, it's easy if you've got no content, because you just swap the class and start putting content in. It's difficult. It's more difficult if you've got to migrate content. But for that, we're able to read the JackRabbit XML configuration files, node type declarations that Magnolia provide, and put them into ModeShape.
Okay.
So it simplifies it.
And if you connect it to a database with more complex tabular data, how do you have to do some kind of mapping? How does ModeShape work there?
With what, sorry?
So, I mean, imagine you'd have two tables connected to each other. You connect ModeShape to that database.
Yeah.
How would you tell ModeShape how the data is, what the structure of the data is?
The connector knows about the data semantics. So you have to program it into the connector.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on ModeShape, but yeah, that's as much as I understand. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you need answers to any ModeShape specific questions, just go to jboss.org/ModeShape. The team are on IRC, all the usual stuff. Yeah.
Okay, actually I got 3 questions. First, once again, about the sequences. Is it possible to detect changes now in the file system for the connector, or isn't it?
If those changes are made via the file system, no. You see, in our case, ours is a specific example of download binaries. And you'll know that, if you have a different version of a download, you simply have a different file. And when the changes that we have, therefore, are simply adding or removing files to the directory. So the file system connector already knows when it reads that a change has happened just because of the way it works. And this is what I mean about you need to understand exactly what's going on to make sure it'll work how you expect.
Okay, but you could potentially extend the connector to know about these changes?
Yeah, you can add that in, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I say, with the SVN one, it's not in there at the moment, but allowing it to call the SVN update command, and that goes over a URL, it doesn't go to a working copy. You can see the changes.
Second question, is it, am I right that ModeShape already supports JCR 2?
Yes, that was the first thing it did. Yeah.
So if we use ModeShape with Magnolia, we could already use JCR 2 features then, in, for example, queries?
Yeah, if you code it to the ModeShape API, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And last question, is there some equivalent to JackRabbit OCM, like object content mapping, in ModeShape? Something like what JPA is for databases, for relational databases, something like this in JCR world? Well,
it's got a JPA connector, and I'm assuming, I mean, I have to assume here, but I would assume that the JPA connector would take in objects and map them to files using Hibernate for relational databases. Okay, and it would also then, we're working on putting on top of InfiniSpan, so InfiniSpan has a JPA interface to go to a data grid. But something like JackRabbit OCM is not integrated yet in... Well, OCM is converting your objects to tables, no? To contents, yeah. So that will be Hibernate.
Okay, yeah, then you could use
Yeah, we
Hibernate.
use Hibernate, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
The ModeShape, your company is the company that built this module. I didn't get the first
Red Hat
part.
fund the development of ModeShape, and it's an open source project so everyone else can contribute.
It's running on JBoss Community as well. It's part of JBoss Community, or
It's a project within the JBoss community,
Okay.
yes. The word JBoss means many things to many people. So to Red Hat, it's a product line,
Yeah.
JBoss EAP.
Yep.
If you mean the app server, ModeShape isn't in JBoss AS, the project. But the plan is to put it into the SOAP platform.
Thanks. Yeah, I mentioned it already. Of course, federation will lead to many document management system repositories. How easy, hard it can be, depending, of course, on the API, which is there for FileNet, for whatever. Will it be to create connectors for the integrators? So is it kind already prepared that it will be easy to write connectors?
Yes. Yeah, the premise is that we'll supply, or the project supplies connectors out of the box, and the most common use cases, and everyone else can write their own and contribute them for whatever else. So, for example, when we write our connector to Jira, we'll probably use the REST API of Jira, and then we'll just contribute that to ModeShape. Thank you.